Hey everyone. We just finished up Proverbs 24, so we're going to be starting Proverbs 25 here. And starting in verse 1, these are also Proverbs of Solomon, which the men of Hezekiah, king of Judah, copied out. Interesting intro. I wonder why it says that these are also. Like, none of the other ones start that way. It's just assumed, and, rightly so, that these are all the Proverbs of Solomon. When you read 1 through 24, and then you get to 25. I wonder if it was just like done on a separate parchment or something, or if these were written at a different time than the other ones. I don't know what the history of the writings of Proverbs is, when Solomon wrote them. If he wrote them collectively or individually, but it's interesting that it says these are also Proverbs of Solomon. Verse number 2, it is the glory of God to conceal a thing, but the honor of kings is to search out a matter. That's a verse that's come up in my mind here recently, because I've been doing a video series on YouTube, developing a proper worldview, and we're going through the creation versus evolution debate. And when you look, like, this verse is what science is supposed to be. Like, God has hidden his mysteries in the world and in the scriptures too. Like, there's hidden gold and knowledge in the scriptures that you just don't see sometimes, and until you read it again and again, and then the Lord gives you enlightenment. You're kind of digging, you're kind of searching out the matter. So God hides things for us to find, and that's how it is in science. Like, you dig into, like, you see a butterfly, or you see a caterpillar turn into a butterfly, and so you would examine, like, the process. Lord, how did that happen? And you'd start observing it and studying it, and it says it's the glory of God. And it really is, because, like, the more you look into things and how God has made things, your mind is blown. Everything from an ocean wave to the stars. Like, the more you observe them, there's wisdom there that at first you don't recognize. You just see something, you just observe something. It's a hidden thing, but then when you observe the functionality and the purpose and the cause and effect, and now we're able to look on a molecular level, and everything we find is awe-inspiring. It reveals the glory of God. You see his handiwork, you see his wisdom, you see his design, his intellect, his power over everything, his creativity, his beauty, his love, his mercy, his kindness. And it's revealed in creation, it's concealed, and when we search it out and see it, it glorifies God. We're stunned. We're in awe of it. And so it's his glory, and it's the honor of kings to search out a matter. And I assume the word kings there is just people in position of authority. Because, we look to, like, a scientist as a position of authority now. So it's their honor to search out a matter. It's the honor of them to spend their lives looking into these things. And then it tells us exactly what, and it is scientific. It says in verse 3, the heaven for height, the earth for depth, and the heart of kings is unsearchable. You can't come to an end of it. We'll search it, like the universe. Like, it's when, even today, like, when they tell you, like, a star is X amount of light years away, that's a guess. They don't know that. Like, they use, I forget what branch of trigonometry or whatever it is that they figure out distance. You have to use, you have to look at an object from two different spots and then draw a triangle between them, and then using the angles and the length, you can figure out the distance. The problem is, when they're looking at things that far, even what they'll do is, to get a good triangle, is they'll measure. Let's say they know the Earth goes around the sun. They know that, and they know the radius or whatever. So they'll measure. They'll take a measurement here on a certain day of the year, looking at a star, and then they'll wait till they get completely on the other side of the sun and take another measurement. So then you have those 2 points, pointing off into the distance. But even that great distance creates such a thin, tiny, like the distance is like that compared to how the star is. So you get like 0.0000 measurement. It's trying to figure out the distance of a star is impossible. And so they just guess, based on that math, but it's very problematic. It could be full of errors. But the point is, that's how big the universe is, and that's just what we know. Like they'll zoom in on a spot in the sky that they think is just a black spot, and because of our telescopic capabilities increasing, we're able to zoom in more and more and more, and they'll find that what they thought was an empty spot is actually galaxies in the distance. It's the universe is massive. And it says it's unsearchable to find the heavens. We'll never come to an end of it. That's the awe-inspiring. God spoke that into existence. That's the kind of power God has. He knows every star by name. He controls every flame burst from every star, every molecule in every star on a microscopic level, every hydrogen atom. And the nucleus and the electrons and the protons in those atoms. It's all controlled by the wise counsel of God without effort. He does it without effort. It's the power, the wisdom, the intellect. It's mind-boggling. We will never, ever, ever, ever come to the end of the wisdom. Like, we'll spend eternity searching out the wisdom and power and intellect of God, and we will only have one fraction of a percent of an understanding. Like, his ways are unsearchable, and just so the heavens are like a declaration of that, and the earth for depth. Like we can't dig to the center of the earth. We can't do it. We don't have the ability. And the heart of kings is unsearchable. Like trying to figure out your own motives, your own desires, your own impulses, your own, like, every impulse you have, if you stop and like think it through, like, why did I do that? What was the motive? What was the desire? The heart is unsearchable. You'll never come to the end of it. And so, like, we can spend our lives, which is what science is, or I would say philosophy, because looking in the heart, but it's more a Christian, religious, born again philosophy, because that's what being born again is. Part of being born again is continual self-examination, searching our hearts. So we get that aspect, and then we have astrologers and geologists who do it properly, who give the glory to God, who don't deny the existence of God. Like, it was one famous scientist, I forget who, like it was somebody like Newton or something, one of the big names, said that when a scientist first begins to study sciences, he finds atheism, and the deeper he goes, he finds God. When he comes to the end of his knot, he finds God. So, like, the deeper and deeper you go into these things, and like Michael Behe with the irreducible complexity theory in his book Darwin's Black Box, finding on a microscopic level that you start to see the design and the functionality, DNA, all these things are unsearchable, and they glorify God. So proper science done properly is an attempt to glorify God. And that's what this is getting at here in 3. And I think I'll actually stop there, because a new thought starts up in 4. But it's very intriguing. I highly recommend you watch or do some research from a Christian creation standpoint of science. Look into go to Answers in Genesis and just start to read articles on, like, the distance of light or anything. Look, search wind. How does wind work? And photosynthesis, and look at it from a creation standpoint, and your jaw will drop as you stand in stunned silence in front of this almighty, all-wise, all-powerful God. Go and watch Creatures That Defy Evolution. You can find it on YouTube, where it's like kind of like a neat National Geographic style view of animals, and just like the woodpecker. The woodpecker will hit a tree to get that bug with such force that his eyeball would pop out of his head if he didn't close his eyes. The problem is, when he draws back, he has to open his eyes and refocus on where he's hitting. And you've heard a woodpecker. Every time that happens, every time it hits, his eye is closing, so his eye doesn't pop out of his head. And every time he draws back, his eye opens and he focuses back in on that hole. God did that, like created this thing for that. Giraffes, when they put their head down to get a drink of water, the blood that would rush to their brain would cause like a stroke. But God created like this like sponge thing in their neck that soaks up the excess blood. It's crazy. The tongue of a hummingbird, just all sorts of, the bumblebee. Today the scientists still can't figure out how a bumblebee flies. The wing power of the bumblebee should not be able to support the size and weight of a bumblebee, but it does. You think about migration of butterflies and birds can go thousands of miles with compasses and GPS in their brains. It's just the unsearchable riches of God's wisdom and might are it's unfathomable, and it's exciting. There's so many good resources on this too. I mentioned Answers in Genesis. One of my all-time favorite books is The Collapse of Evolution by Scott Hughes. Check that out. Long War Against God by Henry Morris, or go to the Creation Research Institute, Henry Morris's organization. Dr. Kent Owen with the Creation Seminar series. There's scientists that actually do real science and prove that verse there in 25. They glorify God with the unsearchable riches of his wisdom and creativity. So, all right, we'll stop there, and Lord willing, we'll pick up in verse 4 next time. I love you. We'll talk to you later. Hey, everyone. We're continuing on in Proverbs Chapter 25. We read through verse 3, so we're going to pick up here in verse 4. It says, "Take away the dross from the silver, and there shall come forth a vessel for the finer. Take away the wicked from before the king, and his throne shall be established in righteousness." So my understanding of what dross is, it's like the impurities in a silver, I think, like in the mineral that you're trying to mine, the silver or the gold or whatever. And so you remove the dross through a purifying process. I think they do it through, what is that called, smelting, or like putting it through the fiery furnace. And it purifies it by burning away those impurities. And so it'll melt down the gold, and then the gold or the silver will come out, and it'll be purified. All the dross will have burned away. All the dross will have been removed. So you take away the dross from the silver, and you have a vessel for the finer. I don't know what the finer is. Maybe that's the furnace. Maybe the removal of the dross is just taking off the rubble or the dirt or whatever. I'm not sure what it is. But either way, what it removed the impurities. And so in the same way, you remove the wicked from before the king, and his throne shall be established in righteousness. Like, I remember when Trump got elected, my prayer for him was that he would be surrounded by wise counselors, wise, godly counselors. Because when a king surrounds himself with the wicked, he's going to get wicked advice. You think about like that one king in the Old Testament. I have no idea which one it was, but excuse me. It says that he had an issue with the slaves or with the servants, and he asked his father's counsel for wisdom, and they said to treat the slaves decently, and they would or to treat the people decently, and they would love the king, and they would be with him for the rest of his life. And then he went and asked his friends for counsel, and they said, "Well, you're the king, you deserve respect, treat them even harsher." And that ended up just turning around back on him. The people revolted against him. Every man to his own tent, I think, was there. We don't have a king, we're not going to follow you. So, like, the idea there is, like, he listened to his wicked counselors, got wicked advice, and it backfired on him. And unfortunately, we live in a time in society where I think especially in America, where most of the counselors, most of those in position of power or position of authority or position of influence that could have the king's ear, they could talk to the king, are wicked people. Like, we have the system in America has been established to the point where you can't ascend to those positions of power and authority and influence unless you're wicked, unless you're sold out to wickedness. And that's very unfortunate. So you can see it would be almost impossible, because a king doesn't know what to do. Like you think about, like, with Donald Trump, like he was a businessman, so he had a genius or field of expertise in one particular field. So he's not going to know how to deal with foreign policy and trade agreements and all this other stuff. He's gonna or health or all that. So he's gonna have to get advice from his counselors on how to handle these things. And if a wicked counselor is in his ear, you're going to get wicked policies. And that's the way it always is with all our rulers. They're surrounded, like in America, most of the rulers in this nation get their counsel from the Council on Foreign Relations, CFR, or Trilateral Commission, or Bilderberg Commission, or people on the Federal Reserve Board, or things like that. And those are corrupt institutions with evil agendas. So they're going to have corrupt and evil advice to give to our rulers and our leaders. And that's the unfortunate situation that we find ourselves in. If we could take away the wickedness from the presence of the king, if we could remove the wicked and have a wise, godly counsel around the king, then the throne would be established in righteousness. Then we would have a righteous ruling in this nation. We would have goodness and justice coming forth from our political rulers, rather than corruption. Put not forth thyself in the presence of the king, and stand not in the place of great men. For better is it that it be said unto thee, Come up hither, than that thou shouldest be put lower in the presence of the prince whom thine eyes have seen. And that's just about humility. Don't presume to go take a place of prominence, not just with a king, but in any sort of setting. You think about, like, in a place where you're just going to have seating. I remember one time going to see a speaker, and the group I was with wanted to get the good seat, and so they rushed to the front. And after we had sat down, some other group came along, and, like, these seats were supposed to be for them. And so it was kind of shameful, like we had taken those seats, and then there was just this awkwardness. But that's kind of the idea here, don't go in, and Jesus talked about that too, like not taking the greater seat, but to go into a lower position and then be called up if so be. But you don't want to be humbled in front of everybody. That's just a pride thing. And it's trying to like, because it's the king, you want to be seen by the king. It's showing favoritism. It's showing, I don't know what the word is, but it's kind of idolatrous in a sense. Like you're giving so much reverence to this person. Like, ooh, recognize me, see me. You're putting yourself into their line of sight, and that's just the opposite of the humble spirit that we're supposed to have. Go not forth hastily to strive, lest thou know not what to do in the end thereof, when thy neighbor hath put thee to shame. That's just, don't run quickly into a battle. Physically, there's always somebody stronger. And in this case, I don't think it's talking about physical, but just verbally or whatever, some sort of dispute, an argument. And you're going to, don't be quick to go into an argument, unless you'd be made a fool of. Bite your tongue, hold your tongue, be at peace, seek peace. We don't always have to defend ourselves. We don't always have to get the last word. As Christians, as a matter of fact, we're supposed to be submissive. People say, oh, you're supposed to just let yourself be a doormat and get walked all over. Yeah, that's the Christian ethic. to humbly submit ourselves to the sovereign hand of God and entrust him to do what's right. We don't have to fight for ourselves. We don't have to fight for position or victory. We just have to do what's right. We have to love others, to humbly serve others. Verse 9 says, debate thy cause with thy neighbor himself, and discover not a secret to another, lest he that heareth it put thee to shame, and thine infamy turn not away. So that's just about being talking about people behind their back, or being a talebearer or a slanderer. And there's a tendency to do that with it, like the subtlety of that particular sin about speaking about people behind their back. Even it'll work its way into your life where you don't even think you're slandering. You think you're just trying to get advice from somebody, like, oh, this guy wronged me, what should I do? But even in doing that, there's a subtle trickery of the heart where actually what you're trying to do is you're presenting your case to a third party to get them on your side. Because you're always going to, of course, you're going to present it from your point of view with your slant. There's going to be your bias in it, even when you try not to have bias. And so you're actually, by going to another person and telling them, pretending that you need counsel on how to use this issue, you're actually just trying to get them on your side, which is divisive. So it's a double sin. It's divisive and slander. If you have an issue with a person, be courageous and go to them and address it with them prayerfully. Pray first. Consider your own sins in the matter. Consider your own heart. Humble yourself. And then go to them and discuss it with them. There's no need for anybody to talk about anybody else behind their back. And it's so natural for us to do, just to say, oh, did you see what so-and-so did? Or did you see how so-and-so said this? Or, did you hear about that? He's so ridiculous. You say just off-the-cuff things like that are really just talking about somebody behind their back, slandering them, causing this other person that you're talking to have an unfavorable view of this other person. And it says here, that him that heareth thee is going to put thee to shame. Because if you go to a righteous man and you say these things, like if somebody were to come and slander one of my brothers to me, I would turn to them and say, what you're saying is not accurate. What you're saying is not true. You're a liar. And so you put them to shame. And so that's basically the heart of what this is getting at here. Just, you ought to speak to the person that one-on-one. There's no need to go tell anybody else about anybody else's business. Just address it with the person one-on-one. So that was verse 10, and Lord willing, we'll pick up in verse 11 next time. All right, I love you guys. We'll talk to you later. Hey, everybody. We're continuing on here in Proverbs. Find my page here. We left off, we're in Proverbs 25. So we read 4 through 10 last time, so we'll pick up here in verse 11. A word fitly spoken is like apples of gold in pictures of silver. That's one of those, you run into a lot of these old sayings, these old colloquialisms in the scriptures in the Old Testament. It's predominant for me in Job. There's a lot of slang, a lot of old sayings that you would have to, it'd be like the slang we have now, oh, that's lit, or man, that's pretty tight, or, that's cool. If you were to take that back then and say those things, or if you were to write it down and then 1,000 years from now somebody were to read it, they'd be like, what are they talking about? That's cool? Like cold, it was touch? How was an action cold, and that'd just be confusing, And they have things like that in the scriptures. There's these things that people said back in the day that now you're like, what in the world does that mean? And it's so apples of gold and pictures of silver. Like, what does that really mean? It's hard to define. There's these old sayings like that are just hard to wrap your mind around. What's cool though is usually by the context you can pick up on whether it's a positive or a negative thing. And so here you definitely see the apples of gold, pictures of silver. This is positive. So a word fitly spoken is a positive thing. It's a good thing. It's, and a word fitly spoken, a word in good time, a word appropriate to the situation that just, there's that old saying, sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. The exact opposite is true. Sticks and stones may break your bones, but you're going to heal from that pretty quick. You get hit, you recover from it. It's no biggie. It's forgotten. But somebody who says something that just jabs right into your core, it pierces you and sticks with you. So words can really be detrimental to your emotional state, to your thought life, to your self-image, to your confidence. So a word fitly spoken, a good word, in the right time, can do the exact opposite. It can build up, it can encourage, it'll stick with a person. And so the idea here to know that, then if you want to love and build each other up, if you want to encourage and spur on, we ought to be looking for opportunities to speak these fit words into a person's lives, to speak kind words to a person. And it's not flattery. Flattery is hypocrisy. Flattery is a lie. Flattery is selfish. You're looking to make yourself look good or advance your own cause. What I'm talking about is a genuine care and compassion and love for somebody that says, I want to encourage and build this person up. So if I see them do something positive and good, I want to speak that to them. And for some reason, that's hard for us to do. It goes against our nature. It goes against our pride. You have to humble yourself in a sense it's almost like you're lowering yourself, you're esteeming another, so you're putting them up higher than yourself. It's hard to do from a flesh standpoint, but it can be very beneficial. Verse 12, as an earring of gold and an ornament of fine gold, so is a wise reprover upon an obedient ear. So an earring of gold, I would assume that has a different meaning than it does today. Now it's just kind of a vain, flashy, look at me type thing. And an ornament of fine gold. To wear something really nice. So is a wise reprover upon an obedient ear. So again, that's one of those that you'd have to know the old context of what an earring of gold meant back then. Like what was the social mindset around earrings? What was the social mindset around an ornament of gold? It's probably not the same as today. Today it's just really vain. Clothing and external stuff is really vain. But whatever it is, it's a positive. It's a good thing. And so it's to be compared to a wise reprover, somebody who in wisdom brings a correction to somebody. You see somebody in error, and with wisdom, which includes prudence and delicacy, which is something that I personally lacked. I'm very blunt in my reproofs. I'm very blunt in my rebukes. But this is saying to be wise, which is to consider, how can this reproof be accepted? How can I be delicate? How can I speak just gently so that the reproof is accepted? And when it is an obedient ear, somebody who accepts that, it's a very positive, good thing to take correction, to be teachable. So it's a dual action. The wisdom of the reprover to think through, how do I bring this to this person's attention in a way that's not going to cause them to become defensive and reject what I have to offer? How do I do it in a gentle, loving, building up, edifying way? And then on the other side, the person receiving the rebuke is to remain humble and meek and teachable, to say, I could be wrong. Let me hear what this person is saying. Let me listen to what's coming my way and consider it. So it's a dual thing, and there's wisdom required on both parts. There's wisdom and meekness and humility and gentleness. All these fruits of the Spirit that come from being born again, that come with maturity in the faith. You learn how to speak to one another. Verse 13, as the cold of snow in the time of harvest, so is a faithful messenger to them that send him, for he refresheth the soul of his masters. Whoso boasteth himself of a false gift is like clouds and wind without rain. That same phrase is used in the New Testament about false teachers. They're clouds without rain. I've often been kind of perplexed by that. I'm sure there's a simple answer that I'm just missing, but a false teacher and a false gift is like a cloud without rain. So I would assume if you're in the agriculture business, if you're a farmer, you're looking to the clouds to provide refreshment to your crops. You're looking to the clouds to bring refreshment, to bring life, to bring sustenance. And so in the same way, I suppose if you're looking to a teacher to deliver the words of life, to bring you refreshment from God, to bring you sustenance from God, and they're a false teacher, it's an illusion. It's a cloud without rain. And here a false gift, somebody who pretends they have a false gift. And I would assume this is talking about spiritual gifts. I suppose it would apply to physical gifts as well, but basically, it's given an illusion of being able to provide something and then not delivering. It's like a cloud without a rain. 15. By long forbearing is a prince persuaded, and a soft tongue breaketh the bone. Just a lot of emphasis on speech here, as it is throughout all the scriptures. Speech is important. James talks about who can bridle at the tongue. The tongue is a world of iniquity. We praise the Lord with our tongue, and then we curse our neighbors. And it just, when loose lips, it's when you're just off the cuff speaking without temperance, without slowing down and thinking things through and thinking, is this beneficial to say? Is this good? Is this wholesome? A lot of things come, a lot of damage is done through the tongue, and vice versa. A lot can be done with a wise, temperate tongue here. And it says, a soft tongue breaketh the bone. In another place, doesn't it say, a soft answer turns away wrath? So just being gentle, kind, peaceable, yielding, temperate, self-controlled, wise, all these things are shown through the tongue, through our words. As Christians, I think that's a sign of our maturity, is you listen to their language. How do they speak? Have they learned to be temperate? And that's something James makes clear, that is never totally tamed. Even the most mature Christian is going to slip up and say something foolish every now and then. But I think as you grow in the faith, that happens less and less. You learn to watch your tongue and to consider carefully what you say, and to just be wise about how you bridle your tongue, so to speak. And part of that is learning to speak softly, learning to speak gently with that wisdom. To, like, the harsh answer just immediately causes people to be defensive. So I think we'll stop there. That was verse 15. Lord willing, we'll pick up in verse 16 next time. All right, I love you guys. We'll talk to you later. Hey, everybody. We're continuing on in Proverbs Chapter 25. I don't know how this happened, but apparently I haven't done one of these in like 3 weeks. I got on my list here that March 22nd was the last one, and we did Proverbs 25, 11 through 15. So I'm not really sure what's been occurring here the last 3 weeks where I didn't do one of these, but we're going to pick up here in 25 verse 16. It says, Hast thou found honey? Eat so much as sufficient for thee, lest thou be filled therewith and vomited. So that's just a general nugget of wisdom in regards to moderation, and being self-controlled, not to overindulge, not just in honey, but in anything. Verse 17, and that's what a lot of the Proverbs are, is just these little pockets of wisdom. You get these, you hate to say it because the pagans have kind of stolen this idea, but with the fortune cookies, where you just open up and you get a little snippet of wisdom, that's kind of what the Proverbs are. You get verses of wisdom. You can take each verse as a separate entity, for the most part, as a separate piece of wisdom, of godly wisdom, and you can meditate upon it. And then on occasion, some of the Proverbs string together a thought over several verses. But for the most part, it's just bullet points of wisdom. And each one is a valuable treasure because it's wisdom from God, the creator of the universe. It's the most valuable thing that you could gain. Each piece is wisdom from the almighty, all-wise creator, who made all things, who gave you breath, and can instruct you on ways to live. If anybody's going to have wisdom, it's going to be him. So it's incredibly wise and prudent to pay attention to what he says, and to value and to treasure each word. So even something that's just casual like that, like moderation, the Lord felt it fit to tell us that, to give us that piece of wisdom, and so we ought to apply it and pay attention to it. Verse 17, withdraw thy foot from thy neighbor's house, lest he be weary of thee and so hate thee. I've thought about that verse quite a bit, about overstaying your welcome. Just leaving before a person wants you to leave. Because if you stick around somebody's house, or you're just in like a general setting where you're having a conversation with somebody, if it strings on too long, eventually they start to get kind of, and everybody does, you just kind of get frustrated and irritated, and it's like, well, come on, it's time to go. And so wisdom is able to discern when that time is occurring, and to leave even before that happens. Like an old Seinfeld was to leave on a high note, and that's actually pretty good wisdom. Leave when you're still wanted, when you're still desired, because then people are going to be like, man, I wish he was still here, and they're going to invite you back. But if you overstay your welcome, it's just not wise. And so that's what that's saying here. Verse 18, a man that beareth false witness against his neighbor is a maul and a sword and a sharp arrow. So to lie against your neighbor is like a maul. A maul smashes and destroys. A sword which cuts and pierces, and a sharp arrow which can sting and kill. So lying to your neighbor does those things to them. You can destroy them. You can pierce them. You can injure them with your words. So it's unwise, and it's just wicked. It's evil to lie against your neighbor. Verse 19, confidence in an unfaithful man in a time of trouble is like a broken tooth and a foot out of joint. That one's always, these next two, that one and the next one, have always kind of perplexed me. The analogy is not one that's readily available in my mind. Like, what is it like to have a broken tooth? I suppose it's painful, right? It's unpleasant. How is that like an unfaithful man? Confidence in an unfaithful man in a time of trouble. So you're in trouble and you need help, but your confidence is in somebody that's not reliable. I suppose that the tooth isn't reliable. You can't really chew with it. You can't do anything with it. Maybe that's and a foot out of joint. I suppose like a sprained ankle. You can't really walk on it. You can't. I suppose again, you can't depend on it. Yeah, so it's weird how when you're lost, like all your friendships are like that. You really don't have sincere, like in your lost state, you somehow know that everybody is selfish, like yourself. Like you really can't depend on anybody. That's the world's like saying, you can't depend on anybody but yourself. People will betray you. Like There's no real friend. That at least that's what I discovered in my lost state. There's no real trusting friendship. Nobody you can have confidence in. In Christ, it's completely different. In Christ, when you're with born again, like-minded people, when you make your fellowship those types of people, like you can have the utmost confidence in them. I have a group of 10, 12, 15 brothers that some of them I haven't seen for months or years, and I know I could call upon all of them in a time of need, and no matter what it is, they would do it. If I needed bail money to get out of jail, or I was 400 miles away and I needed a ride, somebody would come get me or help me get a bus ticket or something. Like, I have people that I can put my confidence in, and that's because these are people with the same nature as me, that born again Spirit of God, that makes them trustworthy, makes them reliable, makes them people of integrity and trustworthiness, so I can have confidence in them. Without the Christ-like character in somebody, without that born-again spirit, you can't have that confidence, because natural man is selfish. Natural man will only do if the desire outweighs his desire not to. And sure, you can persuade somebody by the idea of compulsion, or they're going to think, man, this is going to make me look good, this is going to give me, and they might not intellectually think these things, but that's what's going on subconsciously in the heart. Like, a lost person will only do what is going to benefit them, because lost people are selfish. That's just the nature of who you are as a lost person. So you really can't have confidence in anybody that's lost. Confidence in an unfaithful man. You could even say confidence in a man without faith, although that's not what unfaithful means in this context. But verse 20, as he that taketh away a garment in cold weather, and as vinegar upon nitre. See, I don't know what that is either. So is he that singeth songs to a heavy heart. So, again, another strange analogy that I'm not really sure of the immediate meaning. So, he that sings songs to a heavy heart. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? Like, I know there's in Isaiah it says to put on the garments of praise for the spirit of heaviness. We're supposed to praise, lift up our hearts in song when we're feeling down. If somebody's singing to you when you're down, that's going to lift your spirits, right? So how is that like taking away a garment in cold weather? That's a negative thing. So maybe it's more of a singing songs to somebody with a heavy heart, more of an irritable thing. Like somebody who blesses early in the morning, it says it's like a curse. Somebody, hey, how you doing? And you just woke up and you're tired and miserable and you're not trying to hear all that. Maybe that's what this is saying, like for somebody to come along with a positive upbeat. And that's true. When you're down and depressed, you get pretty irritated when somebody's just all positive and upbeat. It's you're just not there. You're not trying to have that. So perhaps that's what that's talking about, because it compares it to taking away a garment in cold weather. You need that garment when it's cold to stay warm. To take it away is to do damage to you, to cause trouble. And I don't know what vinegar upon nitre is. Nitre. I don't even know what that word means. Nitre. It makes me think of some sort of chemical. Like I think they give that root word. I think has something to do with like nitrous. Like, don't they give people with heart problems that? I don't know if vinegar mixes with a certain kind of chemical, or I don't know what nitrogen means. I suppose I'd have to look that up, but I know what taking away a garment in cold weather means. So, as a matter of fact, once we're done here, I'm going to look up that word, but look it up yourself and then try to figure out, like, what is vinegar vinegar upon that, and taking a garment from the cold. How is that an analogy for somebody singing songs to a person with a heavy heart? I think it's a negative. I think it is that irritation thing, but I don't know. Anyways, that was verse 20. Lord willing, we'll pick up in verse 21 next time. All right, I love you guys. We'll talk to you later. Hey everybody. We're continuing on in Proverbs chapter 25. We read through verse 20, so we're going to pick up here in verse 21. If thine enemy be hungry, give him bread to eat, and if he be thirsty, give him water to drink. I think that verse is quoted again in the New Testament. Could be wrong, but I do believe that if not, that idea is repeated in the New Testament, that turn the other cheek, to pray for those who spitefully use you. It's a characteristic of the born again, to forgive, to show mercy, to be gracious. One thing I've been thinking about, I've been reading this book on imputed righteousness, and I've been thinking about this idea of going beyond forgiveness and considering everybody as completely meeting your expectations at all times, no matter what. Because offense comes when we feel like some sort of expectation we have is not being met. Whether that's we're not getting the dignity we think we deserve, or the honor, or the respect, or the kindness. And so then we get offended, and then as Christians we have to realize that we're wrong by getting offended, and we have to forgive, because Christ forgave us. But this idea of imputed righteousness, where you apply righteousness to them, where you treat others as if they fulfilled all your expectations. So, and to get to the point where you look at people like that all the time in that way, that defeats even the possibility of offense. So then you wouldn't even have enemies. You would treat everybody with love and dignity and respect. Of course, that's the goal that we aim for, but we're never going to get there. So in the meantime, show kindness, show forgiveness. And here, if your enemy's hungry, give him bread. That's just compassion and pity. And I think also it's important to recognize that an enemy is somebody who has established you as their enemy, because we don't view anybody as our enemies. Our enemies are not flesh and blood. They're not humans. Our enemies are principalities and powers. They're the demonic forces, the sin nature, the evil darkness that rules in the hearts of men. That is our enemy, and and the way we fight against that is through spiritual warfare, through prayer, through love, through kindness. So we don't view people as our enemies. So if we do have an enemy, it's because somebody has made us their enemy. It's not because we make anybody our own enemy. But anyways, it's just this idea of being compassionate, even to those who hate you, even to those. And again, that's a characteristic that ought to be present in all Christians, and it ought to be what we're striving for. And then in 22 it says, "For thou shalt heap coals of fire upon his head, and the Lord shall reward thee." I've never really been sure about what that heaping coals of fire upon the head means. So somebody sets themselves up as our enemy. We show them kindness. We do good to them. And by doing that, it says we heap coals of fire upon their head. I don't know if that's a metaphor or if that's some sort of spiritual, poetic way of saying a spiritual reality, like maybe it causes them shame, or you heap coals of fire on their head, like it's I don't know what that would be, if that's just a poetic way of talking about hellfire. I don't know, I've never understood that. I guess the best that I've ever come up with is that when you show kindness and compassion to somebody who hates you, you cause them to feel shameful, and so it would be a poetic way of saying heaping coals of fire on their head, I guess. I don't know. And the Lord shall reward thee. That's just the way of the Lord. The Lord is a merciful, gracious Lord, And so he rewards mercy and grace. He cares for the poor. He cares for the downtrodden. He cares for the humble. He cares for the meek. So when you make yourself humble and put yourself in positions of weakness, which is what you're doing when you show kindness and compassion, you're making yourself vulnerable to be taken advantage of. But the Lord rewards that. Verse 23, the north wind driveth away rain, so doth an angry countenance a backbiting tongue. So a wind from the north pushes the rain away, blows a storm away. So does an angry countenance a backbiting tongue. Somebody is backbiting. That's returning, spite for spite, tit for tat, I think. They're insulting, they're giving back some sort of viciousness, a biting has been given to them, and they're fighting back. An angry countenance, turns that away. I suppose you learn that with children, when you're rearing up children. If your child ever starts to talk back to you, you just have to shoot them a look, and that fear comes over them, and they stop. So I suppose that's what that's talking about. Verse 24. It is better to dwell in the corner of the housetop than with a brawling woman and in a wide house. That's another repetitive theme throughout the scriptures here, especially the Proverbs, about a contentious, or in this case, brawling woman, a fighter. I'm a single guy, and so sometimes I'll go on Christian dating apps, and sometimes you see people describe themselves as sassy or sarcastic women, and it's like that's not a godly trait. That's a warning sign. And that's not to say in a chauvinistic way that women should be pushovers and allow themselves to be walked all over, although all Christians are to have that kind of heart. But the godly woman is described as a gentle, meek, soft-spoken, submissive woman. And a godly husband then is going to he's not going to take advantage of that. So I think that's where the world gets it confused, the feminism idea of we can't be like that or we're going to get taken advantage of. But when that's done right, and a godly man loves and cherishes and cares for his woman with the way he's supposed to, that's symbiotic. Then it's a perfect union. And so Solomon often warns against the loud, the brash, the angry, the contentious, the fighting, the argumentative spouse, the argumentative woman. And that's why a courting process should not be a romantic dating process. It should be an examination of each other's lives to see, does this woman meet the standards of the scriptures? Is she a godly woman? And the woman ought to be examining him, going, is he a godly man? So they both need to be rooted in the scriptures in order to know what to look for. And then the courting process is an examination of that, for however length of period of time it takes to find the genuine, sincere, inner person, to see who they really are. In their heart, are they that genuine godliness, or do they just put on godliness as a show, in some sort of religious show? And that's how courting ought to be. And when you find somebody who meets the godly standards, that's when you ought to pursue. This world, though, turns it around and says, just find somebody good looking and attractive, somebody that you're sexually attracted to, and marry that one. And so you often end up in an ungodly situation with a man who doesn't know how to love and care for his wife with that self-sacrificing love, or a woman who doesn't know how to be gentle and submissive and soft-spoken. And so you need both of those things in order for a relationship to be a godly relationship and work. And here, Solomon's telling us it's better to hide in the attic than to have that contentious, brawling woman, to be with that argumentative fighter. That is not going to be a pleasant situation for a man. And so a man needs to examine a woman prior to entering into marriage. And again, separate from romance. Once you add romance into the situation, you're committing fornication in your heart and your thought lives, or adultery. If it doesn't end up being your spouse, you can't be kissing and rubbing on somebody who's not your spouse. If you're not married yet, there can be no romance. So that needs to be separated, and then it just needs to be an examination of each other's lives. Unfortunately, myself included, we often don't do it the way we're supposed to, and we end up with all sorts of chaos in our lives because of that. As cold waters, well, I think I'll stop there. That was verse 24. There's just a couple verses left, so we'll pick up with that next time. All right, I love you guys, and Lord willing, we'll talk to you next time. Hey, everyone. We're continuing on in Proverbs 25 here. We read through verse 24, so we're going to pick up in verse 25. As cold waters to a thirsty soul, so is good news from a far country. A righteous man falling down before the wicked is as a troubled fountain and a corrupt spring. A righteous man falling down before the wicked is like a troubled fountain or a corrupt spring, like bitter water, I suppose, poisoned water. It is not good to eat much honey, so for men to search their own glory is not glory. It's an interesting verse. It speaks of, I suppose you could take two things out of this. One, moderation. It's not good to eat too much honey. I think we just read another verse about eating too much honey is bad for you. I can't remember exactly how it worded it. I think it was in this very proverb. Yeah, verse 16. Lest you be filled with it and vomit it. And we talked about how moderation is key there. It's not just talking about honey, but just moderation in all things. So it's not good to eat too much honey. And in that same way, it's not good for men to search their own glory, because that's not really glory. To boast, to be prideful, to look for and examine your own, like to put forth yourself. Glory is a revelation. Glory is, it's like the shining of something. Like if you look at a diamond, the shine that comes off of it, that's the glory of the diamond. And so it's the revealed, like it's hard to put into like tangible, like what glory is, because that shine that comes off of it, it's not just the shine itself, it's the emotion that comes from that shine. It's the awe, the majesty of that shine. And we often talk about the glory of God. It's the awe-inspiring, revelatory power, and just you see the works of God, the character of God, and it shines forth His glory. It shows His worth. It shows His value. It shows His reverence. So here, man has a glory, and our glory, like the moon, is a reflection of the sun, the sun. So we have an analogy there in nature, how the sun, S-U-N, gives light and warmth and life, just like the sun, S-O-N, does so as well. And the sun reflects off the moon so that we have light in the darkness. The moon doesn't have its own light. It reflects the glory of the sun. And so we, as born-again Christians, and just humanity in general, we don't have, because we're fallen, we don't have our own glory. And so we reflect the glory of God in our lives. But we boast in ourselves as if we have glory. Some of us boast in intelligence. Some boast in strength. Some boast in speed. Some boast in looks, physical features. Some people boast in their money, their power, their position. Some boast in name, their family lineage. And it's foolish, because to search out your own glory, to find something that makes you stand out, is not glory at all. It's pride. It's the opposite of glory. It's a disgusting, repulsive thing. It's nobody likes pride in a person. Nobody likes that arrogance in a person. It's intuitively a gross thing to see in somebody, but yet we all do it. And so it's saying, like, it's not glory. There is no glory. To search out your own glory, to shine as if you did something. The New Testament puts it, what do you have that wasn't given to you? Again, we're just reflecting. If you have intelligence, God has gifted you intelligence for His glory, to reflect His glory. If God has given you strength, He's given you strength to honor Him, to glorify Him. If He's given you some sort of artistic skill, it's meant to glorify Him, to reflect back to Him. So it's in the same way that it's not good to eat honey. It's not good to search out your own glory, because it's not really glory. And then verse 28 here, the last verse. He that hath no rule over his own spirit is like a city that is broken down and without walls. So to have rule over your own spirit, I think you think of the word, or at least I think of the word temperance right away, self-control, which the New Testament in the book of Galatians, I think, says it's a fruit of the Spirit. It's something that the Spirit produces in you, self-control. So your own spirit, your own emotions, I would assume, your own rage or depression. We see people blown about by every wind. Their emotions are so flippant and extreme. They can go sad like that, and just into despondency and depression. They can go into violent anger, extreme happiness, like just blown about. Like, the Christian is supposed to be one of temperance and self-control and sobriety, to have an even keel in all situations, to never be too high, never be too low, but to always just be content and satisfied, to control, to have a rule over your own spirit, to see yourself getting angry, to hold your tongue, to hold your peace, to see yourself getting depressed, to turn that to the Lord, to rejoice instead. We're supposed to have self-control, to not fall into these fits of emotional extremes. And so that to rule over your own spirit, or to not have that rule, to be prone to fits of emotion, is like a city that is broken down and without walls, vulnerable, open to attack. When you're in an emotional state like that, when you're in an extreme emotional state, and who is our enemy? It's a spiritual enemy. So I think this is talking about being open to demonic attack, to being open, like for the born again, when you're in some sort of extreme emotional state, you're because like there's this thing about reasoning and logic, that kind of, the way our brains work, the reasoning and logical part of our brain kind of goes out the window when you're in emotional highs or emotional lows, just some sort of extreme emotion. It's like it shuts off logic. And so you're susceptible to deception, then you're susceptible to error, any sort of deceiving voice. You don't have the ability to reason through, and that's why we have to be very cautious in all states, whether that's depression or extreme joy or whatever. We're easily deceived and manipulated, and when our hearts are taken by extreme motion, we're in a very dangerous state. And so for the Christian, we have to learn to check those things, to keep our spirit under check, so that we're even keeled, so that we can process things and think things through. And so like it's best to just and it's hard to, I don't know, each emotion, I suppose anger requires something different than depression. If I feel myself getting angry, it's best to hold my tongue. It's best to be slow to speak, to think things through, to process, ultimately to go to prayer, to say, Lord, I'm angry about this, to give it to Him. If I'm depressed, there's a desire to withdraw, to which is bad because you need counsel, you need wisdom. So I don't know where I'm going. I'm going way off topic here, but just, not having that control over your emotions, your spirit, is a dangerous thing. It opens you up to attack. I believe that's what the scripture is talking about here. So, anyways, that wraps up chapter 25. Lord willing, we'll start in chapter 26 next time. All right, I love you guys. We'll talk to you later.